The wind howled across the empty plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the sting of ice and dust. The sky hung low and gray, pressing down on the lonely stretch of land where nothing moved except the dry grass bending under the bitter storm. In the middle of that merciless wilderness stood a single fence post, and tied to it was a woman. Her wrists were bound so tightly the rope had already cut into her skin. Her coat was torn, her hair whipped wildly by the freezing wind, and her face was pale from hours of fighting against the cold. Someone had left her there. Left her to die? Her name was Clara Whitmore, the daughter of a quiet rancher who lived miles away beyond the hills. Just yesterday, she had been riding back home with a small wagon of supplies. She had never imagined that the journey would turn into a nightmare. But on the open trail, nightmares had a way of finding people. 3 men had stopped her, riders with cruel smiles and colder eyes. They had robbed the wagon first, tossing the supplies into the dirt like it meant nothing. When Clara protested, when she shouted at them to stop, one of them laughed. That laugh still echoed in her head. They tied her to the fence post after taking everything. One of them had leaned close and whispered something she would never forget. Maybe someone will find you, if the wolves don't first. Then they rode away. Now the daylight was fading, and the storm was getting worse. Clara's legs were numb. Her fingers could barely move. She tried to pull against the rope again, but her strength was fading fast. She closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the darkness creeping into her thoughts. This was how people disappeared on the frontier. One day they were there. The next day, nothing remained but a story. The wind roared louder. Then suddenly, hoofbeats. At first she thought she was imagining them. But they came again. Slow. Steady. A rider was approaching through the storm. Clara forced her eyes open. Through the swirling snow, she saw a dark shape on horseback. The rider moved calmly, like the storm meant nothing to him. His coat was long and black, his hat pulled low over his face. He stopped a few feet away. For a moment he didn't speak. He simply looked at her. Clara's voice cracked as she whispered, "Please." The man dismounted slowly. Even then he didn't say a word. He walked toward her, his boots crunching in the frozen dirt. When he lifted his head slightly, Clara saw his face for the first time. Rough, scarred, and quiet in a way that felt heavier than the storm. He pulled a knife from his belt. For a second Clara's heart froze. But then he cut the rope. Her body collapsed forward, and the man caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he muttered. It was the first word he had spoken. His voice was deep and calm, like distant thunder. He wrapped his coat around her shoulders and guided her toward his horse. Clara looked up at him, confused. "Why are you helping me?" she asked weakly. The man paused. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he replied quietly, "Because someone should have helped before." He lifted her onto the horse and climbed up behind her. The animal turned toward the distant hills, where a faint light flickered from a small cabin. As they rode through the storm, Clara felt warmth slowly returning to her frozen hands. But she still didn't know who the man was. And out here, names mattered. After nearly an hour of riding, they reached the cabin. The man pushed the door open and helped her inside. A fire already burned in the stone hearth, filling the room with a soft, orange glow. Clara sank into a chair near the fire, her hands trembling as the warmth touched her skin again. The man poured water into a metal cup and handed it to her. "Drink," he said. She did. After a few moments, she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been sitting heavy in her mind. "Who are you?" The man leaned against the wall near the door. For a while he didn't answer. Finally he said 2 words. "Jonah Kane." Clara's eyes widened. Even she had heard that name before. Jonah Kane was an outlaw, a man the law had been chasing across 3 territories. Some said he had robbed banks. Others said he had killed men. But the strange thing was, no one had ever proven it. He simply existed as a shadow riding across the frontier. Clara stared at him, unsure what to think. "You saved me," she said quietly. Jonah shrugged slightly. "Didn't feel right leaving you there." Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the cabin, something else was beginning to take shape. Trust. Morning came slowly. When Clara stepped outside, the storm had passed. The plains stretched wide and silent under a pale winter sun. Jonah was already saddling the horse. "You're taking me home?" she asked. He nodded. They rode across the frozen land for hours. Eventually Clara recognized the hills near her father's ranch. But as they approached, Jonah slowed the horse. 3 riders were standing near the gate. Clara's stomach twisted. The same men who had attacked her. They had come back. One of them spotted them and laughed. "Well, look at that," he said. The girl survived. Clara felt fear surge through her again. But Jonah didn't move. He simply looked at the men with a calm expression. The leader squinted at him. "Wait a second, that you, Kane?" Jonah tipped his hat slightly. The man's smile faded. Everyone on the frontier knew Jonah Kane had a reputation. Not for talking, for finishing things. The leader glanced at his partners. "Maybe we should just ride," one of them muttered. But the leader shook his head. Too late now. He reached for his gun. The moment his hand moved, Jonah's revolver was already in his hand. 3 shots cracked through the cold air. When the dust settled, the men's guns lay on the ground. None of them dared reach for them again. Jonah holstered his weapon slowly. "Ride," he told them. They didn't argue. Within seconds, they were galloping away across the plains. Clara stared at Jonah in shock. "You didn't kill them." He shook his head. "They'll remember today." They continued toward the ranch. When Clara's father saw her riding toward the house, he ran across the yard with tears in his eyes. He hugged her tightly. Then he looked at Jonah. "You the one who saved her?" Jonah nodded once. The rancher stepped forward and offered his hand. "Thank you." Jonah hesitated, then shook it. For a moment it looked like he might stay. But then he turned his horse toward the open plains again. Clara stepped forward. "Jonah." He stopped. "You could stay," she said. "At least for a while." Jonah looked back at the ranch, the warm house, the family waiting there. Then he shook his head gently. "Not my road." He tipped his hat and rode away. The silent outlaw disappeared into the endless horizon, just another shadow crossing the frontier. But Clara never forgot the man who cut her loose when the world had left her for dead. And sometimes, the quietest heroes are the ones history almost forgets. If you enjoyed this powerful frontier story, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unforgettable story from the Wild West. Your support helps bring these incredible tales to life. And again, if this story moved you even a little, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one. Every like helps the story reach more people who love great storytelling. And before you go, take one more second to like this video, share it with someone who loves Western stories, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping adventures from the old frontier.